All right, good evening. This public hearing conducted by the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Maritime Transportation, Power and Energy Utilities, and Emergency Response is now called to order at 5:30 p.m. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic mail on July 1st of 2019, with the second notice provided on July 7th of 2019. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. Today's agenda is the public hearing on Bill number 140-35 COR. And now I'd like to allow the main sponsor of this legislation, Senator Joe San Augustine, to deliver some opening remarks on the bill.
Off day, Mr. Chair, Senator Ridgell. Seduce Mossy for hearing this bill and for allowing me to provide a short synopsis on this bill. Bill 140-35 COR is an act to amend Section 1216 to Chapter 1, Title 12, Guam Code annotated, relative to authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds of AB Wanpat International Airport Authority, Guam, to refund all or a portion of its outstanding general revenue bonds from time to time. I wish to thank you and the Speaker, Tina Munoz Barnes, for your support as co-sponsors of the bill. Bill 140 will allow the International Airport to refund all or a portion of its general revenue bonds to use its proceeds for capital improvement projects that the authority has planned. These proceeds will assist the authority in obtaining up to $51 million in federal grants that will improve airport infrastructure, which require a design completed and deemed as shovel-ready. The proceeds from these funds are monies that will be eligible for reimbursable Federal Aviation Administration grants, eligible capital improvement projects. An example is that the authority will use $1.5 million of the bonds revenue to design the replacement of the cargo apron. The FAA will reimburse the authority this amount and strengthen the grant application and facilitate the access to approximately $20 million for construction of the facilities. A $1.5 investment for a $20 million return is a great deal for Guam. This is a great way to use refund proceeds to Guam's advantage. The return on investment will be greater when Guam does not have to upfront the funds to expend. Renovate or improve Micronesian hub for aviation in the Pacific. I look forward to hearing the testimonies during today's hearing, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for conducting this hearing. I also hope for an expedient release of a committee report as the time is ripe for Guam and the investors to conduct this business for our island's benefit. Zeus Masi.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. At this time, I'd like to invite the panel to begin testimony, starting first with the Guam International Airport Authority's Executive Manager, former Senator Tom Atta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to introduce the folks here at the table. To my right is the Chairman of the GIAA Board, Mr. Brian Bamba. To his right is Mr. Frank Santos, the airport's consultant. And to the far right is Mr. John Rios, the Comptroller for the Guam Airport Authority. To my left, of course, is Mr. Ricky Hernandez from GIDA. And to his far left is Mr. Lester Carlson from Director of BBMR and representing the Governor's Office, additionally on this bond transactions. Also present with us is the Secretary of the GIAA Board, Mr. Don Weekly. He's with us tonight, and of course the Deputy Director for the airport, John Kanata, is here. So before I give my remarks, Mr. Chairman, I would go ahead and yield to the board chair to make his opening remarks.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening. I just wanted to say that, on behalf of the GIA board, we fully support the efforts of the authority and management to take advantage of time and opportunity, and that is, the reduction or at least the lower interest rates that allow it to save some money. At the same time, to utilize any of those savings towards additional grant funding that we're capable of acquiring or competing on a match basis. So we fully support the effort, and I appreciate the clarification in the existing law to allow for a portion of those refunding to occur.
So, Mr. Chairman, the composition of the participants up here at the table, basically the way I would ask, if you'll allow, I'll go ahead and I'll give the opening statements here specifically about the Bill 140-35. And then if I could then yield to Mr. Ricky Hernandez from GITA, who would basically talk about the technical points about the Bill 140. And then if there's any questions as to what the airport plans to do with the funds that would be obtained from this bond transaction, Mr. Frank Santos will be available to answer those questions. And then, of course, with respect to the airport's finances and those matters, Mr. John Rios will be able to address those questions. Mr. Carlson, of course, has, as the governor's representative of the governor's office, certainly is also very much dealt a lot with bond transactions, and so I've asked that he be available to respond to questions as necessary. Mr. Chairman and Senator San Agustin, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in favor of Bill 140-35. The proposed legislation authorizes the issuance of revenue bonds to refund all or a portion of its outstanding general revenue bonds. Currently, the way the statute was formulated was that we either refund all or nothing, but we just want to refund a portion. Title 12, Chapter 1, Section 1216 authorizes the authority to issue refunding bonds for the purpose of refunding any outstanding bonds, whether or not such bonds have matured or are then subject to redemption. If the authority is to realize any savings through the refunding process, they would have to consider refunding only a portion, or approximately $21 million of callable 2013 Series C term bonds. If the authority was to refund all outstanding bonds, whether these bonds are callable or non-callable, it will result in no savings to the authority. Hence, Bill number 140-35 will amend the authority's existing statute and allow for refunding of a portion of the outstanding bonds and provide the authority with annual savings. During the next 2 fiscal years, the authority is applying and competing for approximately $100 million in FAA grant funds. These grants are available to airports in assisting their efforts to improve airport infrastructure, but require a 10% local match from these airports that are applying, in this case, the Guam Airport Authority. If the authority is given authorization to refund portions of its outstanding bonds, a debt restructuring opportunity may arise to realize an annual cash flow savings to fund this 10% local match and other capital improvement projects, provided that a 2% net present value savings is met. This opportunity for debt restructuring for new capital projects has been discussed and has been received favorably by the airlines who are tenants of the airport. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to provide testimony in favor of Bill number 140-35. Sincerely, Thomas Sierra, Executive Manager. I would like to turn it over to Mr. Ricky Hernandez to basically GITA's perspective on the bill.
Sure. Mr. Hernandez?
Hafa Chairman, Senator Clynton Ridgell, and Senator San Agustin, and as well as the members that may be watching the Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, maritime transportation, power and energy utilities, and emergency response. My name is Ricky Hernandez. I'm the Deputy Administrator for the Guam Economic Development Authority. I thank you for inviting the GITA to provide testimony with respect to Bill 140-35. GITA fully supports the bill as written. The bill as proposed would grant the AB Wampat International Airport Authority, GIAA, the ability to refund its outstanding debt as market conditions warrant, so long as certain savings thresholds are achieved. The law as currently written in the Guam Code Annotated enables the airport authority to refund all of its debt, but not some of its debt. The bill would amend the law to allow the airport to refund the portions of its debt that are economically and financially advantageous to refinance. The bill does not authorize the airport to issue new money bonds, but rather grants it only the ability to refund its outstanding bonds, and then only if the minimum savings threshold is met. As you know, interest rates have fallen considerably since last year, and as a result of the airport now has the ability to refund a certain portion of its outstanding bonds for savings. The amount of savings depends on market conditions, but in general, the net present value savings in today's interest environment would be at least 2% of the refunded bonds, which is the previously legislative mandated threshold for determining whether or not a refunding is worthwhile to execute. The bill also makes certain clarifying changes in Section 2 to bring the airport's refunding authorization in line with what other Government of Guam autonomous agencies currently have. And I'll just kind of go over a list. Section 2, sub B1, clarifies that refunding bonds may be issued only if the refunded debt is fully discharged, in the same way that a new mortgage on a house would be valid only if the old mortgage was paid off. Subsection B2 requires the airport's board and the governor to approve the sale. Subsection B3 requires GITA's board to approve the sale consistent with other existing Guam law. Subsection B4 requires a minimum 2% net present value savings to ensure that the airport realizes a worthwhile savings threshold. And then subsection B5 describes the mechanics of paying off the refunded bonds using the same language for other autonomous agencies. The airport already has the legal ability to refund its debt, as Senator Adder just mentioned, under Section 1216, Chapter 1, Title 12, GCA, but only on an all or none basis. A complete refunding of all bonds of the airport would not result in savings in today's market. Most importantly, and based upon the manner in which the airport intends to structure the refunding for a portion of its revenue bonds, the debt service savings generated is expected to be used toward matching federal grants, FAA grants, in the amount of up to $100 million over the next couple fiscal years. Bill 140 thus would allow the airport the benefit of taking advantage of lower interest rates while providing funds for federal matching grants, which ultimately benefits the passengers at the airport authority. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in full support of Bill 140-35. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Senator Adda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I may, of course, the objective of this bond transaction is to be able to get capital. We're looking at about $15 million in order to fund some capital improvement projects. And if we allow, I would ask our airport consultant to just briefly go over some of the projects that we're looking to invest in. So, Mr. Santos.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Senator San Agustin.
Get the mic closer.
We have a total of $15 million worth of projects that we have considered prioritized.
Sorry, just real quick again, for the record, begin by introducing yourself first.
Frank Santos, a consultant for the airport. We have a total of $15 million that is being set aside from the transactions for the bond refunding and any what we call actually from the bond transaction and what is the word for it? The $15 million that's going to be generated. Most of it is going to be leveraged for about $101 million of FA funds for the next 2 fiscal years. The $3 million of that is for what we call HVAC and electrical improvements. They deal with the foundations dealing with the cooling towers and improvements to the airfield lighting vault and the airfield lighting system. The rest is all with FA projects, and I can quickly list them. One of them is the cargo aprons that Senator Ada has raised before. The second one is the aprons project rehabilitation that we have actually put out to bid, and it's awaiting award. The third one is the runway 6 left rehabilitation project, and that's currently out to bid, and it will be open on July 17th. Then projects that are forthcoming is the update of the airport master plan that will occur next year. We are going to update our noise compatibility program that will continue the airport's efforts to soundproof any noise impacted structures and residents. And lastly, we also have a project for the roof replacement. Again, this is just a prioritized list. We have other projects in the queue. If at a future date when we are able to obtain additional funding, then we'll be working on those projects. But these are the projects that are focused on right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Mr. Carlson from BBMR, do you have some testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator San Augustine. Thank you, Senator Ada, too, for your warm invitation. Just a couple of remarks with respect to what it is that we're actually contemplating doing. The 2% net present value savings threshold is net of all costs. So it's not, the gross amount. It is truly the net amount with all the cost of issuance and expenses taken into account. Therefore, it really does reflect the bottom line, which has been the legislative threshold for a number of years now. The bonds will be triple tax exempt. Guam is the only issuer right now that has the ability to issue triple tax exempt bonds with some expectation of repayment. The other entities, unfortunately, are not in the position that we are in. So we actually expect a very, very warm market reception to these bonds. Regardless of the par size of the bonds, it has always been a focus for the government of Guam to put its best foot forward and market the bonds to ensure that we have a sufficient book of business to drive the price and the interest cost as low as possible, therefore ensuring that the people of Guam and the patrons of the airport receive the best bang for the buck. And bond rating agencies actually appreciate when an issuer goes out and utilizes the financing mechanism that is available for restructuring. They look at that as being, reflective of a savvy investor that understands when the market is available to work in their favor and achieve debt service savings. So this bill is very timely. It is very well put together, and I commend the authors and certainly everybody here for putting a very succinct and concise piece of legislation before this committee today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Does anyone else from the panel or anyone else present have any testimony to provide today? No? All right. With that, Senator San Augustine, if you have any questions or any final comments you'd like to make?
Only, Mr. Chair, is that we get an expedient release of the committee report so that we can try to get this on the floor as soon as possible.
Thank you, Senator, and my committee will work diligently on getting this report out as soon as possible. With that, my only comments are thank you very much for your participation in today's public hearing and for your testimony. I think you provided good testimony in favor of this measure. With that, today's public hearing will be called to closing. The committee will continue to accept any written testimony on the bill discussed today. You can provide written testimony to my office at 238 Archbishop Flores Street, Suite 906 of the DNA building in Hagåtña, or you can send it via email to sen.cridgell, that's CRIDGELL, at teleguam.net, or you may send it by fax to 475-4768. This hearing is now adjourned. It is 5:50 p.m. Thank you.